So Wednesday is the 4th of July, and we will honor and celebrate freedom and what that looks like for us, and parades. And by the way, as we do that, our family tends to kind of hang out. If you watch the fireworks in Escanaba, we tend to hang out by the softball diamond. There's a batting cage type there. If you know where that's at, we'd love to have you join us. A few people hang out there, but if you're looking for a place to go, you're welcome to hang out with. And Monica will be there. Everyone loves Monica. I mean, I'll be there too, but Monica will be there. And so if you want to hang out with Monica and me too, and anybody else, that's where we go. Just whatever it's worth. Anyway, so 4th of July is Wednesday, and we'll celebrate freedom. And but sometimes freedom to me can be a little difficult to understand, because there's this sense of freedom both in two ways. There's sometimes this freedom that we fight for, but have you ever done something you're free to do, but you know you probably shouldn't? Have you ever done that before? Like you're free to smoke. It's probably not wise, right? Not a good idea. You're free. You're free to go. Well, technically, I don't see any state troopers here or anything, or police. So technically, you're free to go 90 miles an hour in a 70, but probably not smart. But there's some freedom in that to an extent, and you're free to get drunk, I suppose. Not very wise. I mean, there's a lot of things that you're kind of free to do, and so sometimes freedom can be tough for us. Sometimes we think of freedom and not realize if we don't use freedom in a right way, that it becomes a license for sin. And then there's this other side of freedom that can be tough too. Dr. Perry was in the first service, and I hate dentists. I mean, I don't hate dentists. Anna's not here either, is she, or any hygienist people? I don't like going to the dental office. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't like going to the dental office because there's something really freaky to me about somebody standing over me with a mask, talking to me, and with this drill, and like putting it inside my mouth. That's just not comfortable for me. And it really freaks me out. And so if I had it my way, I would not go to the dentist. I had the freedom to not go, right? Maybe not be wise, but I had the freedom to not go. Or I go for a yearly checkup to the doctor's office. And so this is where freedom can be difficult sometimes. But anyway, in today's message, there's a freedom that 4 young boys have. And sometimes we misunderstand this message, and we think it's just about like the vegetarian or vegan. We think it's just about, have you ever heard the Daniel fast? Like, we really promote this Daniel fast, and it's not a bad thing, but I really don't believe that what Daniel and the boys did was necessarily fasting as we think of it. I think it was more an opportunity to use their freedom to deny themselves some things. This is important, to deny themselves some things that they could have had, so that later on they have the freedom to deny themselves some things they shouldn't have. Are you following me at all? In other words, in these young boys' lives, they learned that by giving up some things when it was easy, that when it became very difficult, when they were going to stand before Nebuchadnezzar, when they were going to stand before him and say, hey, I'm not going to bow, they learned very early how to say no to things they could have, so later on they can say no to things that, like, their life is at stake. Are you following me? And so there's really a spiritual lesson in what takes place that I think sometimes we kind of get lost in that lesson because we get so big on the fasting part of Daniel's eating habits that we miss really how they engage that area of freedom and self-discipline. And that's what I want to challenge you with this morning. So if you're newer with us today and you haven't been here in a while, let me just review where we are. We've been studying the book of Daniel, and this has been like week number 8, and we have chapter 1. But listen, there's hope. Next week, we're going to chapter 2. And so that's the goal. So we're going to hit chapter 2 next week, with Lord willing. And so if you want to follow with us, we're in Daniel chapter 1. If you don't have a Bible with you, it's a gray Bible, and there's, you can follow the text right along there. The gray Bible's in front of you, but it's page 1064. Some of you should have that memorized by now. I say that every week. 1064. You're going to be dreaming about page 1064. And what does that mean? It's the book of Daniel in the gray Bible. Anyway. And so you find that God gives Jerusalem, his people, into the hands of, can you turn the timer on, by the way? Could you do that? God gives his people, Jerusalem, into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. And in that process of so doing that, several boys are taken away, and 1,000 miles away, they head to Babylon. The story of Daniel is really about 4 such boys. I have more than 14 minutes left. Come on. You guys can't see. I have a timer anyway. What am I going to do, right? Just live it up, right? Just 14 minutes and get over it. Okay. And so he uses 3 methods. We've covered 2 of them that Nebuchadnezzar uses to get these boys to really change allegiance from their God, Jehovah, Yahweh, to the gods of the Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians. And the first one we talked about was isolation, and how isolation 1,000 miles away, and how Satan will often try to get you isolated from godly people, and that's the open attack. The second thing that Nebuchadnezzar used that often, again, Satan will try to use in our lives is indoctrination. And last week we talked about how their names were changed and their identity were changed, and often in our lives, Satan will try to cause you to believe that you're something that you're not, or something that you are that's opposite than what God called you to be, right? And so being careful that, hey, who am I and whose am I, and applying that in our life, and so we can trust in God when difficult times come. Finally, the third thing that I didn't talk about, but I'm going to talk about briefly, is he uses intimidation. Intimidation, imagine this, right? And so in Jerusalem wasn't a bad place, per se, but it was kind of normal, if you will. They lived in kind of some huts, not these huge houses, but they lived in buildings. And they, wasn't great amounts of food, but they ate. Imagine leaving that, coming to Babylon. Babylon was amazing. Even today, some of the wonders of the world come out of this area. And just splendor and just the glory of the buildings and the community of Babylon. And then you read the text, and the 4 boys at least are offered like the very same food the kings get to eat. I'm all for that. I love to eat. Anybody else? And so what Nebuchadnezzar uses is really intimidation. And this is why it works, because what happens psychologically when sometimes happens to us, and we compare what we have with what someone else has, we get a little bit intimidated in the sense that, how come they're so much more blessed than I am? Maybe I'm doing something wrong. And so if he can get the boys to do this, hey, listen, it wasn't all that great when you were serving the God of Israel, but man, look at what the God of Nebuchadnezzar does. Are you following me? How many times have you and I been tempted by the things of this world, by the stuff of this world? I mean, how many, this ages some of you, how many remember Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous? Right? Who was the host? Robin Leach. Hey, good to see you guys back. Robin Leach, yeah. And I remember watching this as a child, going, that looks nothing like my house. Like my whole house could fit in their bathroom. We had a pretty big house. We had 6 brothers and sisters, and so, but anybody else remember those days? And I found myself going, my life stinks. I got boats and cars and houses, and so the temptation for you and I is to start thinking that maybe the way of the life that we're living isn't really all that it should be. We could do better, and follow it, because this is going to make sense, and it all comes back around. Here's what Jesus warned us about this very topic. In Matthew 6:24, he said this: "No one can serve 2 masters. He will either hate the one and love the other. he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And so this idea of money or stuff isn't just like 2018 in America. This has always been an issue. There's always been an issue between the stuff that I own and the God that I serve. Which one takes first place? That's always the battle. So Jesus says to you and to me, hey, listen, be careful who's got first in your life. Be careful of intimidation. As a matter of fact, it's so important in Jesus' world, and when Jesus tells us how to pray, one of the parts of the prayer is what? Give us this day our daily bread. So Jesus is saying, listen, I want you to live a kind of life that you are depending upon me daily. So not living extravagantly. Did you know that God blesses us to be a blessing? How many knew that? If you're blessed more than you need, if you have more than you need, you're blessed, and God gives you more than you need so you can be a blessing to others. So in the prayer, we're being taught, hey, give us our daily bread, what we daily need. So if you have more than that, you should be a blessing. If you have less than that, that's not God's design for your life either. And so when Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach, Abednego come together and they say, hey, listen, I want to learn how to live in daily need of God. Are you following? This is huge. When they give up their food, what they're saying is, I want to live my life dependent on God. How do you stand in a culture? How do you stand in a culture that constantly gives and gives and gives and there's so much to do? We need to put ourselves in a position. We put ourselves in a position where we're forced to depend upon Jesus daily. Are you following me? And so let me just kind of walk you through how they did that. The first thing that Daniel really did or recognized is, number one, and this is in your notes, Daniel was realistic about the pressures that he was about to face. So he recognized in the very first thing, in the verse in chapter 1, verse 5, hey, the king assigned them daily provision of the royal food and wine. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself that way. And so, again, I don't think the issue is as much about what he couldn't eat or could eat. The issue isn't as much about types of food. It's more about the issue of, hey, I don't want to defile my life. I don't want to defile who I am. I want to live dependent on my God, not in luxury with the king. Some say that it's just ceremonial. I don't think the issue is ceremonial food. I don't think the issue was even that the food was being offered to idols. I believe it really was the issue of sacrificing and not defying or defiling myself with the things of this world and instead separating my heart unto the Lord. And you see that as a pattern for their lives over and over again. So how do you and I stand? Hey, be realistic about the pressure. Know what's coming. When I got saved, when I was saved at a young age, I really believed that after a couple years, the temptation would go away. I believed that if I loved Jesus enough, if I could just get around him enough, and then all temptation would just be gone. And so I'm year 5 into this thing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't cuss anymore, but all of a sudden I have like way more weaknesses than I ever thought I had. Let me ask you a question. Like, how many of you have been saved for 15 years or less? 15 years or less. You've been following Jesus 15 years or less. Okay. For you that hit 15 years or whatever, have any of you found that, yep, temptation stopped after year 15? Anybody raise a hand? Like, stop. No more temptation. You hit that point. Okay. Anybody been saved for like 15, let's just say 30 years? You've been saved for 30 years, so right around there, like 30 years, yeah. Okay, keep them up. Okay, you can put them down. So let me ask you a question. You've been saved that long. Have you found at like that 30 mark that something happens dynamic and you're just like, I made it. All temptation just goes away. Anybody kind of found that at the 30-year people? 30-year, 50-year people. Everybody say for 50 years, 50-year. No one for 50 years? 50, oh, there we go. So, okay. Lorraine, right? Anybody else 50? I see another hand, 50, okay, 50 years. Yeah, I didn't know some of you were 50 years old. So, wow, yeah. So, at 50 years, do you guys, does your temptation stop? It doesn't, does it? So what a disappointment. So one of the realities I think that we need to have in our culture, in our world, in our church is that, listen, you never get to a place where temptation stops, that you need to be realistic about what's coming, and in that realism, prepare accordingly. Amen? And that's what they did. They prepared accordingly to what they were going to face. I've found in my life that with every new opportunity that comes, there's always new struggles. If you remember Jim and Sue Kuzma, Pastor Jim and Sue, they like to say this, with new levels come new devils. And that, hey, listen, it doesn't matter what place you get in your spiritual life, you're going to find that, the closer you get to Jesus, the more you think you're becoming like him, the more you're going to see how ugly you are. It's kind of like, looking in a mirror far away, and you're looking here, and it looks pretty clear, and all of a sudden, the closer you get, you see smudges and all kind of wrinkles and stuff, right? Like, I look pretty good if the mirror's back there. I don't think I look too bad. But when I get closer, I'm like, man, I have aged. And so the more you become like Jesus, the more you see how much more you need to grow. So be realistic and prepare accordingly. Giving up the choice food wasn't as much about fasting as it was about standing. It was a statement that I will stand. It was a statement saying, listen, that while I live in Babylon, Babylon will not live in me. And so I would encourage you for a moment to think about what are some things in your life that you can make a discipline of, if you will, removing, so that when more difficult times come, they're easier to follow God's way. Are you following? Does this make sense a little bit? There is this idea that some of us, we kind of have this question of right and wrong, that we just think, this is right and this is wrong, and we kind of live our lives just with this idea that this is right and this is wrong, and we get lost somewhere in the middle because not everything is that crystal clear. And so I would just propose to you that instead of asking the question of right and wrong always, but ask the question of what will help me grow closer to Jesus? What will help me to be more like Jesus? What will cause me to grow closer to him? So if that means that, from now on, every Monday, I live Monday without sugar. Like, that sounds weird, right? But just work with me a little bit. If that helps you in your life to be disciplined on Monday with something that really doesn't matter, if that helps you on Monday, I'm telling you, if you learn that discipline on Monday, when you get to Friday and you're hanging out with your friends somewhere, you'll be a lot stronger to resist what you shouldn't have. Learning to look at your future and what you're going to face, learning to make disciplines in our life today that will help us tomorrow is a process of spiritual growth. It will help you to grow. It's about training your heart and your mind and your soul and your body. It's about learning to trust God in small situations so you can trust him in large situations. It's interesting in these boys' lives. Today, they would give up food. Good food. But they'd give up food today so that tomorrow They're standing before Nebuchadnezzar, and he says to them, listen, either you bow or you burn. Church, listen, I really believe it was because of a self-disciplined lifestyle that they were to say with strength and boldness and confidence. Let me just quote what they said. King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. What you do, listen, what you do in your private lives, what you do in disciplining yourself, what you do in setting yourself up with a daily dependence upon God, what you do when no one's looking is going to affect what happens when everyone's looking. You learn to love God and trust him in private so that you can stand for him in public. If you're not standing for God in public, I would suggest to you that your private life, you're also not learning to trust. Number 2, be or predetermined to be resolute. Predetermined, be resolute. The boys said, I will not defile myself. They were resolute. They decided beforehand how they would respond when situations came. If you're single, Monica and I, we were single once dating. Remember that? Yeah, it's like 25 years ago. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. Our anniversary is coming up on August the 12th, so happy anniversary. I said it first. Yeah, brownie points. Anyway, if you're single, set up your boundaries first of what God is calling you to be and how he wants you to act, so that when you're dating somebody and you're in a situation where you're willing to, your body's telling you to compromise, you've already predetermined where the limits are. Are you following? Amen. Single people, don't wait for the moment when your body's going, ah! And hormones are flying for you to say, no, I will not go any further than, it's not going to happen. So set for yourself first the boundaries that you're going to do. Same thing in every area of your life. Predetermine how you, gentlemen, this is mostly a guy thing. Gentlemen, if you're going to go somewhere where you know there's some attractive ladies at, or the beach or wherever it might be, it's not their fault they're attractive, right? I know everyone's sitting with your spouse and you're going, I'm not saying anything, dude. There is nobody attractive except my wife. That's it. Everyone else is dogs. And so, but you predetermine beforehand, gentlemen, you predetermine beforehand that when you see somebody attractive, you will look away. That's a decision you make long before the situation comes. You look at your phone, you look to the side instead of looking at. Are you following me at all? I know no one's going to say amen because it's just awkward, but ladies, the same thing. This is usually a ladies' issue, but when you get together with your other ladies, it's not always ladies. I'm not stereotyping anybody. Just follow. Forgive me, whatever. It always works for ex-Catholics. The sign of the cross, okay, yeah, I got it. You're right. So if you know that God doesn't want you gossiping about people, gossip is talking about people that you have, to people about people you have no business talking about. Are you following? Right? That's gossip. So if you're talking to somebody about somebody and they have no business knowing about that somebody, that became gossip. You predetermined beforehand before I go hang out with the ladies, how I'm going to respond when they start bringing up somebody or somebody's marriage or somebody's job, or did you hear what somebody did? You decide beforehand how you're going to respond in a situation. So it might be, hey, I have to go to the bathroom. Like, whatever it is. I mean, you can lie, I think, sometimes. I know they're going to crucify me, but that'd be a good time. Well, you could still go to the bathroom anyway. I feel like I'm in trouble at that point. But do something. Make a way out. But this happens in every area of your life. And so the boys decided, hey, that I'm not going to defile my God no matter what happens, come life or limb or whatever, no matter what. They decided beforehand how they were going to respond. It's the same thing with giving. We decided in our family that we will be a family that, I know I'm talking a lot about tithing, that's not trying to be over tithing, but it just hits the message. So we decided that we would tithe and that we would give generously above that. And so what happens, we pre-decided that with good biblical, like we love in Jesus, no emotions, so we did that. Don't you know that every time you really follow God in a step of faith, like there's a big obstacle that comes real soon? And so when I get the flat tire or what just happened in one of our cars, it was like $900. Oh yeah, the little air compressor thing breaks and it's like $700 and that's the discounted price. And so you decide, because you pre-decided who you are, what you will do, how you respond, no matter what happens later on, because you pre-decided, you're able to continue following what God laid on your heart, right? And so pre-decide. Pre-decide what you will do and who you are and how you respond and what God has laid on your heart so that when difficult times come, you're able to stand. You're able to stand. Let me just hit a couple of these real quick, and as the worship team comes up, I'm way over time. But number 3, I love this. The boys, I feel like I should be singing a song. Every time I sing the boys, like the boys are back in town. Anyway, anybody else have the same song going in your head? You didn't before, but you do now. The boys are back in town. And stand with others. And so while Nebuchadnezzar tries to isolate, this is what's so cool about how God works. The Bible says that God will take what's saving men for evil and he'll turn around for the good, right? Romans 8 works all things together for the good for those that love him. So how Nebuchadnezzar tries to isolate the boys away from their culture, away from their world, and so doing, he actually put them in a place where they could stand with one another through difficult times. In other words, it wasn't just Daniel that said, hey, I'm going to fast, or I'm going to give up food, or whatever the verbiage you want to use is. It wasn't just Daniel that said, I'm going to set my life disciplined. It wasn't just Daniel that said that. He said, hey, you guys, I don't know what happened, but I think this feeling like these 4 teenage boys, probably 13, 14 years old, got together and said, listen, man, if we don't decide to stand right now, we're not going to stand in this. This is like all of our friends are falling. No one's making this. And how are we going to stand? I got this feeling they started talking to each other and said, what if we just deny to eat the food of the king? What if we ask permission and not to eat that food? Like, let's go pray about it. That's a great idea. And so they go pray about it, right? Don't you kind of get the idea that's probably what happened? And so I want to encourage you in your step of faith, in your journey, don't do it alone. Get some people to come alongside you and say, hey, man, you know what? Especially a young person, this social media thing is killing me. It's like I'm addicted. I keep looking at it. What if we decide every Tuesday we're just going to put our phones down and we'll say no social media Tuesday or no phone media? Like, that's a great way for friendships to kind of help each other, right? Amen? Or what if you get some friends here together and say, listen, every time we get together, man, we always, we go to the bar because we're trying to share Jesus. I got saved a month ago and I still want to share Jesus, but I get there and before I know it, I'm drinking. Like, what if you had some friends of yours that you said, listen, I want to be Jesus' example in the dark places. I want to be Jesus. I want to be light. And so could you keep me accountable? Could we agree that we're just going to stand with each other? Are you following me at all? Right? And so in your spiritual journey, find some people to walk it with you and to just mutually say, yes, we're going to stand in this small area so we can stand later. Find some people to do it with you. And finally, one of my favorite parts of the verse is found in verse 11. But it's really this: show humility and honor those over you. Show humility and honor those over you. I love when Daniel, page 1089, isn't that what it is? I said we'd have it memorized soon. 164, who said that? Good job. So 1064, Daniel chapter 1, verse 11, here's what it says. Daniel said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, hey, verse 12, please test your servants for 10 days. Do you hear that? Please. Man, I love 13-year-old boys that say please. Anyway, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. I love the humility in that. Does anybody see that? Like, they're not forming a protest. There's not a big conspiracy. There's not like, I'm going to go on social media and tell everybody you guys stink. Right? Hey, would you please just consider this? You're in a person in authority. Would you please just consider this? Would you allow us for just 10 days, eat just vegetables and water, and hey, if God blesses it, great. But if not, hey, we'll do whatever you want. Like, don't you see the humility in that? So the fourth thing I think really that teaches us is we stand and continue to stand in a culture that is daily going away from God by acting in humility towards those that are around us. That we honor those that we disagree with, that we respect them, that we're not belligerent or hateful or cruel or malicious or judgmental, but that we honor them, especially those that are not of our faith. We were talking earlier, right? And I know that I get in trouble. I get in trouble when I say stuff like this, but do you remember the Starbucks thing? The Starbucks thing a few years ago, they had, was it the red cups, and they took off Christmas on it or something.
Yeah, they took away Christmas from everyone.
So this was this big conspiracy, like Starbucks took away Christmas. Can you believe that? Like Starbucks can't take away Christmas. Jesus is alive. Starbucks is going to die. But they got like on this big deal, like this big band, boycott Starbucks. Like, just don't go. Like, right? Who cares? They're not saying, I love Jesus, get rid of Starbucks. They're saying, or get rid of Jesus. They're like they sell coffee. Am I in trouble? Like, they just sell coffee. Who cares? Like, you don't got to get a conspiracy against them or anything. Just like, drink coffee or don't drink it. Like, I don't know. I'll get letter this week. My email is scott@newlife906.com. That's Scott, SCOTT, at newlife906.com. I will answer all of you email with humility and kindness.
I'll respond from Jason at New Life 906.
All right, Scott, you're on tonight at 6:30. Next week, we're going to hit chapter 2, Lord willing.